as you can tell, we wanted to use brevity in our headliner. So we're going to talk about everything from how brands define and identify influencers and how to effectively communicate with influencers to get the type of content that you want. We've got an amazing panel of both influencer and brand partners up here on stage. So they're going to walk us through how they're using influencers. Oh, sorry. We're going to talk about how brands are using influencers, where to find them, what types of compensations are used, the legal pitfalls and how to avoid them, and some case studies about actual successful campaigns that were run by these brands. So, I would love to introduce you to our amazing panelists. First up, we have Trina Small. Trina is the baby shopaholic. She is a wife, mother, and influencer full-time. She was listed by BuzzFeed as one of Instagram's top 25 moms. She works with brands like Johnson & Johnson, Neiman Marcus, Walmart, Verizon, Carter's Inc., just about everybody. So Trina is amazing. She's got beautiful children. We're excited to have you, Trina, as our only influencer on the panel. Woo. Next up, we have April Callahan. April is a communications director at a little place called the Coca-Cola Company. She is responsible for some amazing global initiatives, such as the 5x20 program, which is a sustainability program used to enhance women's economic empowerment around the world, as well as the Coca-Cola Foundation, Project Last Mile, and has a focus on Africa, Latin America, and Asia markets. She also has a background at Jackson Spalding, working with other big companies such as Delta and Shell. Welcome, April. We also have Shayna Keith, who is the Public Relations Director for Cox Communications. Shayna is a technology PR expert. She's been working in both agency and corporate space for the last 17 years. And she also used to be with the amazing Porter Novelli. And we have Nadina, I'm gonna ruin the pronunciation.
Bourgeois.
Nadina Bourgeois, the social marketing manager at Carter's. She handles all of the social strategy for both OshKosh B'gosh and Carter's brands. And she definitely has 10 years of experience doing all digital everything, being super involved in social media, and has worked on strategy for brands like Barbie and Bausch & Lomb and other pharma brands. Which leaves little old me. My name is Kelly Dye. I'm the Director of Digital Strategy at Everywhere Agency. It is an influencer agency located in Home Sweet Home, Atlanta. We have our own in-house influencer network of over 4,000 influencers that we use on campaigns with brands like the ones up here on this stage, as well as Macy's and Up TV. All right, so this is an interactive panel today, so if you have questions throughout, please text them to the number 22333. If you text Kelly Dye 665, you will be joined in the conversation, and you can ask as many questions as you want, and we will collect them and we will get to them at the end. All of this information will be on all of the other slides, so you can see them. And if you're technology challenged, don't feel embarrassed, raise your hand, and my friend Stephanie over here will help you out. All right, so let's start at the very beginning. How do you define an influencer? It's a complicated word. So Nadina, talk to me about how you define an influencer.
I think at Carter's and OshKosh specifically, we're looking for people who not only love the brand, but want to tell stories about the brand and how the brand comes into their own life and has an influence within their community. So people like Trina have an amazing influence with their community and have super engaged followers. So for us, that's something that's really important and kind of what we define an influencer to be.
All right. April, do you have any thoughts about how Coca-Cola defines an influencer?
Very similar to what Nadina said. I would say it's a way to reach our consumers without going through the traditional journalism channels. A lot of the news and the focus that I'm working on are what I would call kind of our social responsibility areas. And to be quite honest, they're not always breaking news. So if I use an influencer like Trina or others who have credibility with their audience, then they're able to tell the story for us. We very often use them in very genuine and authentic ways, actually sharing experiences so that they're not merely advertisers for us. So very different when you think about traditional journalists, influencers, and advertising.
Trina, you are an influencer. How do you kind of define that to your friends and family and others?
Oh Lord, I get asked that all the time. Like, what do you do? I'm like, I just talk about stuff. But for me, influencer is someone that you trust. You trust their opinions. Like, for me, it's talking to like a girlfriend. So I'm like their online girlfriend, mom friend that they don't see in the park, but they can go online and be like, hey, what is she doing? And I share my honest opinion, and I just interact with my audience.
All right, very nice. So more and more, it seems that brands are starting to actually devote budget to influencer marketing. So it's happening, but Shayna, what was Cox's reasoning for starting to use influencers?
I feel like I'm getting interrogated. So why? So we, way back in the day, like you said, 17 years, that was really kind of hard for me to swallow. I've been doing PR for a long time, so I'm in a very traditional PR department at Cox. And third-party resources, third-party spokespeople is something that we've been doing in PR forever. So this is really a digital form of that. I mean, it's looking to experts in the industry that are just more validated than, quite frankly, our executives. Not that they can't represent the brand, they can. Certainly great at that, but consumers trust third parties, peers and people like them, versus executives at a company. So that's why we use influencers, and we base that on the target audiences that we're going after, and they can do that in a really authentic way, really much better than we can in our corporate public relations office.
All right, you mean people would rather watch a cute mom of three other than a balding PR guy?
Perhaps.
Perhaps.
Yes.
What do you think, Nadina? Why is Oshkosh in the game?
I think, for us, we aren't working with huge budgets, and I think this was a way that we could get a lot of reach and impressions without putting a huge price tag on everything. So, and on top of that, it gets us this kind of qualitative engagement that we haven't seen with anything else. So for us, it's just a really great ROI and a way to kind of story tell with our consumers that we aren't able to do in another way.
Well, I know content is really important to you guys too.
Yeah.
So getting that beautiful imagery that you can repurpose.
Yes, that's a huge part as well in developing our social strategy for both brands. I would say almost 50% of our content is coming from our influencers or user-generated content, and that by working with influencers, we're getting this content that we wouldn't be able to produce ourselves, and it's with real kids, and we've seen that our mom is really much more engaged with the type of content that looks like a picture she would take versus the lifestyle or catalog images we take of our baby models. So.
True. All right, so how do you find influencers? You can't just wave a flag, and cold pitching is typically a bad idea. So Shayna, how does Cox go around finding people for those specific markets?
It's probably a mix of our own research and, quite frankly, Kelly, that's everywhere.
Shameless plug. It's a shameless plug for Everywhere Agency.
Yes, that's true. So we've found some fantastic influencers that have been working with us, I think now for 5 years. Sarah has been working with us for 5 years, Sarah Evans. She's one of our digital correspondents. And then I'm not sure if you all found Safety Mom for us as well, but we've identified some others. But we've done just some research. Other people that we've seen just represent other brands really well. So it's a mix.
Okay. April, how about you? How do you source your influencers?
Well, of course, we use Everywhere sometimes. The benefit of using a group like Everywhere is they already have the relationships with the influencers. And so that's really helpful. On our side, we also do some research. And a lot of it might be by using different hashtags. We want to make sure that they're already brand loyal with our beverages and our brands. And then we're also looking to see if they're actually interested and engaged in the topics that we're trying to communicate about. So if it's about women's empowerment, or if it's about education, or about HIV/AIDS, we're looking to find people that are passionate and genuinely interested in those topics. Because if they're not, then that content's not going to work for their audience. So it's a little bit of research with hashtags and different things like that, and then looking for others who already have those relationships with bloggers and influencers.
I think that's a great point too, that you want to find someone who's already naturally talking about your brand, and then telling them that they can have more for it. Trina, what about you? How do you typically start a relationship with brands?
I also go through everywhere. So they got both ends going here. But yeah, a lot of times a PR agency will reach out to me. Some are new, some I've heard before. So when I have a relationship with them, it makes it a little easier to make the campaign come to life. And then working with an agency also, they kind of filter out a lot of stuff. They push back on the brand sometimes, like, okay, that's not gonna work because, you know, Coca-Cola may have one idea, and then they'd be like, you get a blogger to do that, it might not go over well. So by the time it comes to me, it's like we're on the same page. So that helps. And I get a lot of cold emails, you know, smaller companies reach out to me, and, you know, I don't discriminate. So I just tell them, hey, this is what I can do, and, you know, try to work it out from there.
Awesome. What would be your advice to brands on what not to do in a cold pitch?
What not to do, you know, ask for all this, you know, do this, take a video, take 20 pictures of your kids and do this and fly here and go there, but we don't have a budget. That's kind of like, you know this takes time, right? You know it's gonna cost me money, right? And you know, and it's not always about the money, but you know, when you do that all in the first email, more than likely I'm just gonna reply and say, no thank you, and just keep it moving. Because if you're gonna tell me there's no way you wanna work with me, but you don't wanna work with me, you want me to just work for you, it's not a partnership. And I think that's just the wrong foot to start on. So just make sure you're just open, and, you know, at least wait till the second or third email if you're like, okay, well, we really don't have it, or something like that.
And I think just to add on to that from the brand side, something we do a lot is we use a lot of social listening and are looking for people who have mentioned us, whether it's in an Instagram story or one of their posts, or it's an expectant mother who just had a baby. And we will often send people free clothes on behalf of our brands and say, congratulations, or your child is so cute. And it isn't always, you know, something that we get a photo back for or a direct response, but it's kind of our way of engaging with people and kind of spreading the Carter's Oshkosh love throughout the community. So it's kind of a nice way to just like start the relationship going and kind of see where it goes. Sometimes it's nowhere, and then other times it leads into a really great relationship. So.
Money, money, money. So how does it all work? We get asked this question a lot, but Shayna, why don't you talk to me a little bit about how do you determine the value of the content that is produced?
Well, I mean, so we work in different ways with different influencers based on projects and campaigns, but we place a huge value on the content that they produce, and we're very specific about what we ask for so that, you know, expectations are met. But there's like 3 different ways essentially that we work with influencers. So we have an influencer that we work with on an annual basis. So there's an annual contract in place. We work with her almost as if she's an agency. So she is almost as a part of our team. She understands our products and services. She understands our positioning. She's actually a customer. You know, Carter's is a great brand, right? And they make adorable clothing and accessories for kids. And so when you're talking about imagery and things like that, and, you know, moms and new babies, I mean, it's like, oh, warm and fuzzy. We're a cable organization, broadband company. So it can be harder to find influencers that embody the brand. So I think it's actually a little harder for us. And then also, we're only in certain markets throughout the US, so none of you are Cox customers. We are not in Atlanta. But, you know, so we have to identify people that can actually use the products and services. So Sarah Evans is one that we work with, and so we work with her as a sort of a digital correspondent is what we call her, and she represents us out in the field at industry events. She actually serves as, you know, a media spokesperson oftentimes, depending on the topic. So that's kind of an annual contract basis. And so everyone on the team will, leverage her expertise as needed across the board. The second bucket in terms of engaging with influencers, I would say, is kind of a project basis. And a great example of that is Safety Mom. Her name is Allison Jacobson, and she is an expert on online safety and family safety. And so we engaged with her a couple of years ago to help support our home automation product called Home Life. And so she's fantastic. She talks much more about how to keep your family safe online, but then she can tie in our Home Life messaging really, really well. And so we were trying to target moms with her. And so she was kind of hired specifically for that product set. So she's within that campaign, and I would classify that as like a project that we work with her on. So it's not necessarily, it's a little more project by project, but it's not that annual contract that you would engage with in terms of like an agency. And then the last, I would say, is just kind of off the cuff, not off the cuff, but I guess what's the word I wrote down? Kind of one-offs.
One and done.
One and done. Well, we might go back, but and Danny Burke is a great example of that, and we've gone back to Danny Burke, and I think
Danny Burke is a Snapchatter.
He's a Snapchatter
out in San Diego.
Yes, he is. I think he's like 23. He's super savvy, does all these great stories for brands, and he's fantastic. But and it just works for him, and it works for us that way. We sent him to CES, I think, this year to do some stories, some Snapchat stories, and to do some other content for us. And it was a one-time gig, and we'll likely go back. But that's just the way we work together. It just works for us that way. So, and then we've had other influencers in that same boat. So, it just depends on what your needs are, from a business perspective. And I would just say that, if you're doing kind of that annual contract basis, to be very specific about what you're asking them to do, but also give them the ability to be creative and put their own brand on it, their own personality to it. You absolutely do not want to tell them exactly what something should look like. Definitely give them that freedom. But what I mean be specific, I mean just in terms of the pieces of content that you're looking for, and that kind of thing, metrics.
No, I think that's a really good point, that you want to make sure that contractually everyone understands the minimum requirement of how much content you want, but you definitely don't want to limit their creativity, because that's what you're paying them for. It's not just the exposure to their audience, it's also the content creation. Trina, you make your living as an influencer, so how do you determine your rates?
Well, I don't have like a set rate chart. It's more my time. So I'm thinking in my head, like, okay, how many hours is this gonna take from start to finish? I have 2 little girls plus myself, and a lot of people want pictures of me with my girls. That's 3 heads to comb. Those are 3 people that gotta get dressed. So I'm about crazy by the time it all goes down. So for me, it's very important to make sure that my time, like, is it worth it, So if somebody says, we want to give you $50, which I get that, $50 to, do this post and 2 Instagrams and stuff, I'm like, do you know what it takes? I'd rather give you $50. Right. So yeah, I think I just kind of go by my time, what they require, and if the budgets don't match up, then, I'll, hey, I can take this away and this away, because some people, they want the world. So, and it's okay to take things away, because sometimes what I'll do is I'll take some things off and I'll still add it on, just because if everything runs smoothly and I like working with that brand, I will go ahead and add that on. Like, maybe I will do an Instagram story that you wanted, but you couldn't, it was out of your budget. So I think it's okay to just draw back. And then if working with somebody good or everything goes well, they probably do more than what you expected. So that's usually kind of how it works.
I will say in my experience that a lot of influencers go above and beyond once you have an established relationship,
Yes.
because it's also beneficial for their brand.
Yes.
A lot of the time. April, you do a lot of unpaid programs. So what kind of added value or experience value are you providing people?
Yes, we do. Yeah, sorry, Trina. No, we do it
The
for
one brand I haven't worked with. No,
Well-
I'm just kidding.
We can talk.
Yes.
We do. The area that I work in, again, is very focused on social responsibility and the programs that make you feel really good. So what we focus on a lot is finding influencers who are willing to perhaps travel or experience or, genuinely feel a part of one of our initiatives and then share on their social channels. So what we might do is, curate a very small or special group of influencers and pay for their travel and host them somewhere. But we don't often give out, checks or cash. And the reason for that is, one, we don't have it for programs like this, and two, we want it to be a really genuine experience. And so we feel like, if we can cover the cost and make the case that this is worth your time and it's much more than a job, it's an experience, we feel like that is beneficial on both sides. We feel like it helps us, it helps our consumers, and it also helps the influencer. And of course, not to mention, we do have a very well-loved brand, and so sometimes that can help influencers make other connections. So we kind of feel like that's a good value. The other thing that we do that we help our influencers with is not just the fact that they have, perhaps worked with a large global brand, but we share their content on behalf of them if they're willing to let us do that. So they may actually get promotion out of it from our social channels. We'll retweet, reshare, post content on our e-magazine website, and that's usually part of the deal. We want them to post on their sites, but we also want them to develop content for ours, and then we kind of co-publish. So we look at it as more of a partnership, but we're very upfront with this at the beginning. And then it's up to the influencer to decide if it's worth, his or her time and if it's a value to their business. Because it is a business at the end of the day.
I'll add, okay, since she put me on blast. But yeah, there's certain relationships that I do take because I really feel strong. I've done things, I've worked with Carter's and Oshkosh for years, and I've done a lot of things outside of just the sponsored content just because they said, hey, Trina, can you do this? And I'm like, sure, because I like working with them, so that is important. So once you build that relationship, but I think like kind of off jump, just coming through like, hey, you might want to work that relationship a little bit more.
Well, and just to add, so to complete the thought on the focus on the programs that we're usually using influencers on, it's not about selling our beverages. Right. So that's where it falls a little bit differently. It's not saying, can you post a picture of you in a beverage? It's about, right, can you go meet a woman in Africa and tell me about how that changed your life? And so it is a little bit different. Yeah, but we share the love. We take them to nice hotels. Lots of Coca-Cola.
So all of that to say, compensation is wide and varied, and it can be payment, it can be experience, sometimes it can be exposure. I think a lot of times it's a mix of 2 or 3 of those things. They definitely all work together. Somebody had sent in a question of, do you recommend a legal contract for influencers, or do emails work just as well? What's your thoughts, Nadina?
I like contracts.
So we do a variety of things. I think there's stuff that's happened via email if it's a one-off, but we work with Everywhere, who helps us kind of negotiate those contracts with all of our influencers for our larger campaigns. So, every spring, summer, fall, holiday, Carter's and Oshkosh both do huge influencer activations. So we definitely have contracts in place for that and for the larger scale things, but I've seen kind of definitely a wide array of options.
I would just say, as an agency, when we first started, we definitely worked with just emails because influencer marketing was a new thing and everyone was trying to figure it out. But I do think that if you're treating people as professionals, that working with contracts makes sense. It's the CYA method. I highly recommend it. Or a memo of understanding, something that's a signed piece of paper that explains your brand guidelines is also very important. All right. So you're paying people. Is it PR? Is it straight advertising? How do you qualify influencer marketing? Shayna, what do you think as a PR professional?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the earned and paid space are one now, so it absolutely is PR. I mean, yeah, so much of what we do in the past, several years, but probably most in the past, 3-4 years, has merged more and more and more. So much that in our department, I mean, most of my time is actually focused on paid content. So it's much even broader than, you know, PR, but we try to match in our campaigns, obviously, what we do from a influencer perspective and content perspective. We're also trying to talk to the media about those same topics, whether it's products or other brand campaigns that we're doing. So absolutely, I mean, it's a validated way for us to get our message out there. So it's absolutely PR, and we actually want to be doing more influencer marketing.
All right. Anybody else have thoughts on where influencer marketing fits in the mix?
For us, I agree. It's PR for us. It's, you know, it's usually part of a larger campaign. So it might be complemented by other things, but it definitely falls into the PR space.
All right. So we're going to talk a little bit of the type of content that you can expect from influencers. So we'll just go down the line. So this is an Instagram post from Baby Shoppa, from Trina at Baby Shopaholic. You should all follow her on Instagram immediately at Baby Shoppa. Talk to me a little bit about the types of content that you create for brands.
Well, what I do, I like to tell stories. And then when I work with a brand, I like to show how it works in my everyday life. I'm not doing anything that anybody else is not doing. Like, I'm not up on this like house on the hills or something. Like, my child has to brush her teeth. So I share the story about how I'm using this toothpaste that turns blue. It's blue and it turns white when they're done so they can keep brushing. And so many parents found that helpful because they have a hard time getting their kids to brush their teeth. So I'm like, hey, I got a solution. And, you know, I told the stories, you know, how it was a struggle, and she would just like swipe her mouth and be done, and, you know, going to the dentist, and then we found this and how it helps our lives. And so that's why moms or other people, you know, are interested, because I'm sharing something that can help make their life easier. And I only work with brands that I believe in and that I trust. So I don't share a product I haven't tried. So yeah, I just incorporate stories with my daughters on the products.
How much more are you using video these days?
I've been slacking on my YouTube, but I am very heavy on Snapchat, working on the Instagram stories, but I love my Snapchat family. It's like all these strangers sending me videos. It's kind of crazy, but I love it. It's just like right there, then and now. So Snapchat is really good. I feel like right now my influence is really strong on Snapchat because it's right there in the moment. The pictures, the lighting is bad. It's like, hey, I just found this at the Walmart. It's on sale. And, you know, and then everybody's like, oh, I just picked it up. And it just like works instantly versus me having to take the photos and stage the pictures.
So it's less curation.
Yeah, and it's real organic. And I think the same thing with Instagram stories, but I feel like there's going to be a shift in Instagram stories just because it's Instagram. You know, everybody's life is perfect on Instagram.
That's very true. They're very different platforms. Nadina, how about you? What kind of content are you guys getting created by these influencers?
Everything. So from Twitter content to Instagram to pins, and obviously blog posts is probably, you know, where we started first and foremost, but since I've been at Carter's, I've seen what we get back in terms of content really grow, and we also want our influencers to be sharing kind of on the platforms that work best for them. So if Instagram isn't their number one engaged platform, we don't necessarily want to force them to post there, even though for us Instagram is kind of like our, you know, favorite organic channel. So we do want to make sure that everything is aligned with what works for our influencers, and we get sometimes really amazing designed pins. We get photos of children in the clothes, and we try and repurpose it as much as we possibly can. So we get a lot of like, this is an example of a lay down image that one of our bloggers took, and it just gives a different angle on the content that we're typically providing or showcasing to our fans on a daily level. But I think, you know, we've seen really great engagement from sharing that blogger content. So if someone is doing a DIY and happens to be wearing Oshkosh clothes while they're doing it, we'll tweet that out, and our followers love that because it's resourceful, useful content that they can use, but as a brand, we don't have the time or budget to create ourselves. So that's where we really lean on our influencers, is to help us create that content that we can't produce. And as far as like organic Instagram stories and Snapchat, I think that's also another place we're hoping to kind of venture down, is how can we leverage our influencers for Instagram story takeovers and to watch them go in store and shop a new collection. So we're really excited about venturing down that path. It's definitely, as everyone knows, live video is scary for brands. So, but I'm excited for the day it finally happens.
I would like to add to that. So again, I worked with Oshkosh and Carter's for years. So on my Snapchat and sometimes Instagram, when I remember, I'll do like while I'm shopping in the store, and then I'll do, if they sent me a package, I'll unbox it. And that's why I said, like, because we have a partnership, that they didn't ask me to do that, so that's organic. You know, I'm opening the box right, you know, once the delivery guy drops it off. Hey, I got a package from Carter's, and I open it up, show each item, just lay it on the floor. Like, this is cute, I'm gonna pair it with this, and people like that, and that's something organic. I don't know if they see it or not, but I'm doing it. The streets are watching.
So, Nadina, before you guys make that jump into takeovers, what kind of rules are you going to put in place? How are you going to find people that you trust the brand to?
I think it will, well, the first time we do it will definitely be with influencers we've worked with numerous times that we feel showcase our brand in a light that aligns with kind of how we showcase our brand. I think the biggest struggle will probably be like on the internal side and getting leadership to agree and feel comfortable with the process. I was in a session yesterday where someone had a really great idea of kind of writing out all the bad things that could possibly happen and then your solution for them, and it kind of, as an exercise, helps make everybody feel really comfortable that like there really isn't anything that horrific that could happen, you know, like it's everything will be manageable, and you're working with somebody you trust, so
You can hit delete.
yeah. Hopefully not, but yeah, there's always kind of an exit strategy, and that I think makes people feel more comfortable and just feeling really comfortable with the people you're working with.
All right, relationships are everything. April, would love to hear more about kind of how Coca-Cola tells stories through its influencers.
Sure. So to expound a little bit on a few of the things I mentioned earlier, we have put together trips where we will take influencers to, you know, remote areas of Africa or Latin or South America, or somewhere where we have some of these empowerment programs or initiatives that we feel are really compelling and that a lot of people don't know that Coca-Cola is doing. These aren't the sort of things that we would put out an ad on, but these are things that influencers can share on our behalf. So if we were to host a group like that, again, we would carefully, you know, curate the group, and it would be a long project leading up to the actual destination. You know, you would be engaging leading up to it, you would be making sure visas are in order, you would be making sure everyone has background on the program that they're going to be visiting, and you would set up not just, you know, a day, you would set up 3 days of different things that, you know, some of it may be content you're wanting them to glean from and share, some of it may just be an enjoyable time while you all are together. And that group is I keep using the word carefully curated because it's not just about their audience, it's also a little bit about chemistry. You're taking a handful of people across the world sometimes, or meeting up from different countries. You want to make sure that group, you know, has a really good chemistry together, that you're going to enjoy working with them because it's a lot of time that you're spending together, lots of hours in vans and buses and planes. And then you want to be really sure, as we were saying earlier, that everyone's going to get a win at the end of this. So I want to make sure I get my content out of it. I want to make sure that they get the experience that they want out of it. And I want to make sure that it posts in a timely manner so that we can leverage it then and not, you know, 6 months later when they get around to it. After you get home from that trip, nobody really wants to dredge it back up 6 months later. You want to do it right away. And generally we might be pushing these around perhaps an occasion on the calendar. You know, maybe it's International Women's Day or it's HIV/AIDS, you know, day. There's different occasions that we might be building content up that we can share. And then, it's about continuing that relationship. So no, we're not going to do this with the same group over and over and over again, but we might drop them notes from time to time. We might send a little thank you gift or a reminder that we're out here, or a happy Mother's Day note. There's different ways to keep that relationship going so that they don't forget, that we're all kind of part of the same group now and that we've had that experience together. So it's been great, and the results can vary. I mean, I'm sure we're gonna get to that. But when you go on a project experience like this, it's like Trina's saying. I mean, there's the minimum of what you expect, but as long as you're there capturing the content, most people don't mind if they put a few extra posts or things like that out, because the hard work is actually capturing the content. It's fairly easy to share it. And then we work on, as I mentioned earlier, how can we use their content on our channels so that they get some, additional promotion out of it, but it also shows, to our audience that we're working with people that are everyday people who care about our brands and what we're doing in the world.
All right. Someone in the audience asked about what to do if an influencer has a negative experience and what are the risks there. So you're taking influencers to Africa. I imagine there might be a few things, bumps in the road, malaria, things that could happen. So how do you kind of safeguard against a backlash?
It's similar to Carter's experience of thinking through, all the things that can go wrong and doing your best to assemble a plan. So there's certain precautions you can take, but I would also say, anytime you work with an influencer, whether it's shipping them a piece of product in the mail versus taking them to Africa, it's a risk. They're not traditional journalists. They're in some ways paid in kind or otherwise, but they behave like traditional journalists and they have the power of the pen and their audience, and it's their channel, so you can't really go and ask for a retraction if they really have a bad experience. It is a risk, and you try to prepare for it. For a trip like Africa, there's a lot of conversations leading up to about vaccines and what are your dietary needs. And we make sure, of course, that, we have security teams with us. We make sure that we always have, an additional vehicle if someone needs to depart and get to medical help. And we're not taking people to dangerous areas per se. They're just very different areas from what we're used to. So there is always a bit of a risk, and there's the risk in the actual trip to Africa, and there's also the risk in making sure that people share good experiences. So no, not everything's perfect, but when you have a good relationship and you have really good travelers with you and good chemistry, those little things don't always make it out in the blog. But there's some influencers that I've shared some amazing experiences with, and we all kind of were nervous about what might be happening next when we were on the road. But we became good friends by the end of it, and we still laugh about some of those experiences. And honestly, it wasn't relevant to what they were trying to share. They didn't want to share with their audience that, we got on a really tiny hopper plane that we were expecting to be a big jumbo jet, and it was nerve-wracking. But, that was irrelevant, but it was a fun experience.
Right. Shayna, here's Danny Burke for you up on the wall. So Cox has definitely been venturing into new platforms. Bravo, very brave. What were the concerns about moving into platforms like Snapchat?
Well, we were, looking to hit, a younger demographic. I think he's 23. Snapchat, I think target is like 18 to 24, the big users for Snapchat. So we used that as a tool to get to, that audience. You can imagine that, there's trends out there that, people are cutting the cord and things like that. So to combat that, we really, aside from positioning the value of, a cable package and broadband and all of that, this is a way for us to hit that audience in a meaningful way. So no, he's not talking about cord cutting, but it's a way for us to meet that audience. So, we worked with Danny, we've worked with him a couple different times now, and mainly it's on like event activations where he'll go, I think I mentioned CES earlier, and I think at the top of April, your slide said stories that your brand can't tell. I heard recently what content marketing does is to tell stories that marketing isn't telling. And so, no, marketing isn't sending a 23-year-old jumping off the stratosphere in Vegas talking about fast internet. So he did that, and it was awesome, and we got some really, really great results from that. And he just did that off the cuff. Like, we let him just kind of go do what he does, and he created some really fun stuff. But we take that content, aside from Snapchat, we'll have him do some other videos and some other things while we're with him, and then we use all of that content in a variety of other channels. One of the channels that has served us really, really well in the past couple of years is what we call digital insertion. So essentially it's native advertising. So we'll put our content into the advertising network, and our advertising and digital friends love us for this type of content. It performs extremely well. In fact, it performs 5 times better than marketing's content at 1/10 of the cost. So they love PR and our little budgets. So that's working really well for us. And so we also take him to, we have the smart home activation that we're doing, roadshow, where we're putting 52 devices in a home, in a single family home, and showing kind of the home of the future today. And he did a great piece there and really got the eyes of what we're doing there, and the possibilities of a powerful network like ours to that audience is priceless.
And with that, and the trend of disruption, Shayna must leave us for another presentation. Thank you for being here, Shayna. The rest of us are staying. Don't go anywhere. So we touched a little bit on this, the entrusting your brand to an influencer and kind of the fear factors. So Nadina, how do you keep control and let creativity fly?
Sure. So our strategy, for the most part, is we have big kind of market share events like back to school, for example, for Oshkosh is a really big one. So I will work with the brand team to kind of figure out what is the story we want to tell this season. And in the past, our kind of first time we did this was one we did for spring break last year. So before this activation, we had kind of used influencers in a way to just really push our product and do whatever they wanted with it. But this was the first time we created a story architecture and asked influencers to really talk about how they get ready for spring break, how they pack things up. And it kind of goes along with what Trina's saying, is that there's actually a story to tell there. So we worked together to make sure that aligned with what we were putting out on our social channels, and that this is the story our influencers were going to tell. We kind of asked that they stay within a certain given collection that we were selling to make sure that those products were in stock and fit the storyline. And then we kind of wait and see what we get back, but usually it's pretty in line. We do send blogger kits, we call them, or media kits, whatever you want, you know, your definition of it, but it's all pretty much the same with assets and story architecture, words to avoid. We hate the word kiddo. I don't know why, but that was just something that was always stuck with me from our VP. But yeah, so that's kind of how we kind of put stuff out there. But I've talked to Trina before about how we really want like the story that's told to be authentic and something that actually makes sense. And, you know, if someone feels like our story architecture does not relate to their family at all, and, you know, then we're not trying to force it, you know, in any way. We want it to really resonate with that family. So that's very important to us, that it's like this authentic story and makes sense, because your followers know when you're not telling a true story. You know, it's, they know you, they know that you're only supporting brands you like, and we never want to force that. So, but with that Break for Spring campaign, we just saw tremendous results. We did include a coupon with the post, and that was really so we could track sales. So if you follow Carter's or Oshkosh and subscribe to their emails and you're a mom, you know we send out coupons all the time. So the point wasn't really to give someone else another 20% off or whatever it was to be able to track. And we just saw incredible sales, and the ROI I think was over 700%. So it was a really great way, and since then we have made sure that all of our influencer programs are really this storytelling kind of mechanism. We do still work with more promotional bloggers because we still see a lot of traffic generated from those sources, but we see higher revenue coming from the storytelling posts that we do.